body! I can't breathe! Get it out of my mouth! The dirt! Get it off me! Please! I can't breathe! Get me out of here! Please! Help me! Oh God, it's in my mouth! I can't!
The last thing Emeka felt as a living man was wet red soil pressing into his mouth. Not the shovel, not the ropes, not even the betrayal, just the dirt. Heavy, cold, and final. 3 days before they buried him, Emeka found the file. He was not looking for it. He was in the survey office in Kumasi going through old route maps for the Accra North Highway project. The biggest contract his firm had ever landed. 300 kilometers of road, government money, the kind of job that makes a man's name. The file was mislabeled. It said Soil Sample Reports 2019. But inside were photographs, 31 of them. Families, women, children. Old men sitting in plastic chairs outside mud houses, all taken from above like drone shots. Each photograph had a red X drawn over it in marker. Emeka sat with the photographs for a long time, and his left eye did not twitch because he was not saying anything. He was just looking. He turned the last photograph over. Someone had written on the back in blue pen, cleared. Section 7B, February. Section 7B was exactly where the new highway foundation had been poured in February. Emeka put the file in his bag and walked out of the office without saying a word to anyone. That night, he called his business partner, Kofi Mensah. Kofi was the one who had brought him into the project 4 years ago. They had built the firm together from nothing. 2 men with old laptops and 1 truck between them. Emeka trusted Kofi the way a man trusts his own hands. "I need to show you something," Emeka said on the phone.
Are you sure it's gone?
"Come to the site office," Kofi said. "Raymond and I are still here."
Kofi, it's Emeka. I have the documents. Where are you?
Kofi, I'm at the office right now. We have a problem with the permit. Where are you?
I need you to just tell me the truth, Kofi. Are you safe?
Raymond Asante was the third partner, quiet man, the one who handled government relations. Emeka had always found him polite but strange, the kind of man who smiled too quickly and too wide. Emeka drove to the site. He spread the photographs on the table. Neither Kofi nor Raymond looked surprised. That was the first sign. "Where did you get these?" Raymond asked. His voice was flat. "The archive office, mislabeled folder." Emeka looked at Kofi. "Did you know about this?" Kofi did not answer. He looked at Raymond instead. That was the second sign. "Emeka," Kofi said slowly, "sit down." "I don't want to sit down. I want to know if 31 families were cleared from Section 7B before the foundation was poured. I want to know what cleared means in this context." Raymond picked up one of the photographs. He turned it over, read the writing on the back, and set it down carefully. "It means exactly what you think it means," Raymond said. The room went very quiet. Emeka's left eye began to twitch, because he was about to say, "I won't tell anyone," and his body already knew it was a lie. He grabbed the photographs and moved toward the door. He did not make it. He woke up in darkness so complete, he thought he had gone blind. Then he breathed in, and soil entered his nose. He tried to lift his hands. They were bound behind him. He tried to kick. Something solid pressed against his feet from all sides. He opened his mouth and dirt immediately touched his tongue. His brain did not understand it at first. It kept sending normal instructions. Stand up, turn on the light, call someone. Then understanding arrived. It was underground. He was in a box. No, not a box. Just earth. Packed earth on all sides. They had wrapped him in something, a tarpaulin maybe, but it was already pressing his face. He screamed. No sound travelled. He felt the drug still in his system, something they must have put in the water Kofi handed him, before the photographs were even on the table. They had planned it before he arrived. The meeting, the water, all of it. His left eye twitched violently even in the dark, because somewhere in the terror, his mind was forming one clear thought. Kofi knew. Kofi has always known. Emeka fought the tarpaulin. He bit through part of it. Soil filled his mouth immediately. He spat, bit again, twisted his body in the tiny space they had given him. He was not a big man. That was the only thing working in his favor. He found a gap at his left shoulder. He pressed into it. He dug with his bound hands as best he could. Our soil fell onto his face. He kept digging. His lungs were burning. He kept digging. The burning became something else, something that felt less like suffocation and more like pressure, like something pushing from outside his chest rather than failing inside it. He stopped struggling, because something above him in the soil was moving downward toward him, something that smelled like rot and iron, something that felt like it had been waiting in this ground for a very long time. Emeka opened his mouth to scream again, and the darkness entered him. Above the burial site, a single vulture landed on a dead tree. It had not been there a moment ago. The night watchman at the highway camp saw it and felt suddenly cold. He went inside and did not look at that tree again. By morning, the vulture was gone, but 30 meters away, and the soil had been disturbed. Something had come out. The first thing Emeka understood about his new existence was that he could not touch anything without it flinching away from him. Not people, not animals, not even leaves. He reached for a branch on his second morning and it curled back like a hand pulling away from heat. He stood there in the forest outside Kumasi and looked at his own arm for a long time. It was his arm. Same dark skin. Same small scar below the elbow from a surveying accident in 2019. But the shadow it cast was wrong. Too wide. Too dark. And when he moved, the shadow took a half-second longer to follow. He was not dead, but he was not fully alive either. He was something in between, and the world could feel it. He found water and looked at his reflection. His face was his face, but his eyes were different. The pupils had expanded until almost no white remained, and they moved independently, one tracking left while the other held still, the way a vulture's eyes move when it is scanning ground from above. He opened his mouth to say something out loud, just to hear himself. Nothing came out, not a whisper, not a rasp. Complete silence, as if his voice had been left in the ground. His left eye twitched, because the first thought that came was, how do I warn my son? Daniel was 17. He lived with Emeka's sister, Abena, in Accra. He called his father every Sunday at 8 in the morning without fail, had done so since he was 12. Emeka had missed exactly one Sunday in 5 years, when he had malaria and could not lift the phone. This Sunday would be the second. Emeka did not know yet what that would cost him. He spent the first day learning what he could do. He could move without sound, completely without sound. No footsteps, no breathing, no rustle of clothing. He walked through dry leaves, and they did not crackle. He stepped through a puddle, and the water did not ripple until after he had passed. He could see in complete darkness as clearly as midday, and he could fly. Not smoothly, not beautifully. It felt like being grabbed by the neck and thrown upward, and then catching the air the way a man catches a rope, desperate, instinctive, graceless. But it worked. He rose above the trees and looked down at the highway site and saw everything. He saw Raymond's black Land Cruiser parked at the far end of the site. He saw two men with shovels near where he had been buried, patting down the soil carefully, checking it. He saw Kofi standing at the edge of the site on a phone call, facing away from the other men. And he saw something he had not expected. There was a woman sitting in Raymond's car. She was not moving. Her hands were in her lap and her head was turned away. But the way she sat, too still, too rigid, told Emeka she was not there by choice. He did not recognize her from above. He would recognize her later, and it would break something in him. He went to Raymond's house first, not because Raymond was the most guilty, but because Raymond was the one who had spoken the truth in that site office without blinking. It means exactly what you think it means. And something about that calm had lodged in Emeka's mind like a splinter. Raymond Asante lived in a large compound house in Ahodwo. Security cameras, iron gate, and 2 dogs that were trained to be mean. The dogs smelled Emeka coming from 40 meters away. They did not bark. They lay flat on the ground with their heads down and did not move until he had passed. Emeka walked through the compound as if the gate had not been locked. He did not understand how exactly. It was less like passing through solid things and more like the solid things deciding to step aside. He did not question it. He had stopped questioning things somewhere between dying and not dying. Raymond's study was on the ground floor. The window was slightly open. Emeka went in. The room smelled of cigarettes and printer ink. There was a desk with 2 monitors, a filing cabinet, and on the wall, a large printed map of the highway route with sections marked in different colors. Section 7B was marked green, completed, and the other sections had names written in small letters next to colored pins. Emeka leaned close and read them. Village names, all rural, all along the route. 5 more sections were marked in yellow, pending. Emeka stared at those yellow sections for a long time. His shadow did the slow, dragging thing on the wall behind him. 5 more. They were not done. The highway still had 5 more sections to go through, and whatever they had done in section 7B, whatever cleared meant, they were planning to do it 4 more times. He needed to leave evidence. The problem was that he could not pick anything up. Every time his fingers made contact with paper or a pen or an object, it slipped away from him. Not violently, just a slow, steady rejection, like 2 magnets facing the same direction. He could exist in the physical world, but he could not grip it. He stood in Raymond's study and felt something he had not felt since the soil entered his mouth. Helplessness. His left eye twitched. Because he was thinking, I came back for nothing. Then he looked down at his feet. He had been standing on a loose sheet of paper that had fallen from the desk. And where his bare feet touched it, there were marks. Not footprints, something else. Dark impressions, like a brand, but in the shape of fingerprints and survey coordinates. The coordinates of section 7B burned into the paper from his feet. Emeka stood very still. Then he looked at the map on the wall. He walked toward it slowly and pressed his right palm flat against section 7B. When he pulled his hand away, the green color had changed to black, and in the black, clearly visible, were the GPS coordinates of the burial site, numbers that only a surveyor who had physically mapped that ground would know, numbers that were not on any public document. Raymond would see it in the morning. It would not tell him who left it, but it would tell him that whoever left it had been there, had been underground, and knew exactly where the bodies were. Emeka went to Kofi's house next. This one was harder. Kofi lived in a modest place in Bantama. No security, no dogs. A small garden that his wife Ruth tended every morning. There were children's drawings taped inside the front window. Emeka stood outside for a long time. He and Kofi had shared food at that table inside. He had watched those children grow. The youngest, a girl named Sophie, used to fall asleep on Emeka's shoulder at family gatherings. His left eye twitched again, because what he felt standing outside that house was not rage. It was grief. And grief, he was learning, did not care that he was half dead. It followed him into whatever this existence was and sat in his chest like a stone. He did not go inside Kofi's house that night. He told himself it was because he needed a different strategy. He knew that was a lie. He was back in the forest by dawn, sitting in the high branches of an old neem tree, when his new vision picked out a vehicle moving fast on the road below. Raymond's Land Cruiser. It stopped near the burial site. Raymond got out. He was on his phone, talking fast, walking in tight circles the way men walk when they are scared, but trying not to show it. Emeka watched from the tree. Then Raymond did something unexpected. He opened the back door of the car. The woman Emeka had seen the day before stepped out. She turned, and Emeka saw her face for the first time. It was Abena, his sister. She was not hurt, not visibly, but Raymond had one hand loosely on her arm, and she wasn't pulling away, which meant she understood that pulling away was not an option. Emeka's hands gripped the branch. The branch split down the middle with a crack like a gunshot. Raymond looked up sharply toward the tree. He saw nothing. But the split branch fell and landed 10 feet from him, and he stepped back fast, pulling Abena with him, his eyes scanning the tree line. "It's here," Raymond said into the phone. "Whatever it is, it's here right now. I'm telling you, Kofi. We need to burn this whole section of forest, tonight." Emeka did not hear the rest of the call, where he was already moving, because if they burned the forest, they burned the only ground where he could still feel his own weight, the only place where he was still, somehow, anchored. He did not know yet that the forest was not what tethered him. His son was. And Daniel had not called on Sunday, because Daniel was no longer in Accra. Emeka found his son by following the smell of fear. He did not know he could do this until he was already doing it. He rose above the tree line, turned north without deciding to, and let something pull him the way water pulls toward a drain. It was not a smell exactly. It was more like a feeling with a direction. The specific terror of someone who shares your blood. It led him to a concrete building 40 kilometers outside Kumasi, an old cocoa processing warehouse. Disused. The roof was rusted orange, and the walls had gone grey with age. There were 2 cars outside and one man sitting on an upturned bucket by the door, scrolling his phone. Emeka circled above it once. Then he went in through the roof. Daniel was sitting on the floor in the back room with his wrists tied to a pipe. He was not hurt, but he had been crying recently. Emeka could see it in the dry tracks on his face. The boy was trying very hard right now to look like he was not scared. He had his jaw set and his eyes fixed on the middle distance, doing the thing Emeka had taught him. Pick a point and breathe to it. Emeka had taught him that for exam anxiety, not for this. He crouched in front of his son. Daniel could not see him. Emeka knew this. He had tested visibility on 3 people already. None of them registered his presence unless he made physical contact with something near them. Even then, they felt unease, not recognition. But Daniel stopped breathing for a moment. His eyes moved slowly, not toward Emeka, but around him, the way eyes move when a room suddenly changes temperature. "Dad," Daniel whispered. The word hit Emeka like a stone to the chest. He pressed his palm to the dusty floor beside Daniel's knee. The dust darkened and shifted. The survey coordinates of the warehouse burned into the concrete. Exact GPS numbers, latitude and longitude, precise to 4 decimal places. Daniel looked down at them. His face changed. Not relief, something more complicated than relief, and the expression of someone receiving information that explained something terrible while simultaneously making it worse. He had his father's eyes. He understood numbers. He read the coordinates twice. Then he looked up at the ceiling and said, very quietly, "I hear you." Emeka left the warehouse and did not let himself think about Daniel's face. He had 2 things to do and not enough time to do both. The first was evidence. Real evidence. The kind that could not be dismissed or burned or buried. The kind that put names on paper in front of people with authority. The second was stopping the fire. Raymond had called for it the night before. By Emeka's calculation, they would wait for deep night, 2, 3 in the morning, when the Harmattan wind came from the north and would carry the flames fast. They would burn the forest section containing the burial site, and whatever trace evidence remained in that soil would become ash. And Emeka understood, in a way he could not fully explain, that if that soil burned, he would not survive it, not die. He was already beyond ordinary dying, but dissolve, come apart, become nothing in a way that could not be reversed. He had perhaps 6 hours. He went to the one person he had not yet visited, not Raymond, not Kofi, the person above both of them. His vision from above had shown him things over 2 days that he had been assembling slowly, the way a surveyor assembles a map, point by point until the shape of the land becomes clear. Raymond handled government relations. That meant Raymond had a contact inside the government, someone who had approved the route change that sent the highway through Section 7B, someone who had signed off on whatever cleared meant. Emeka had surveyed enough government projects to know the signature chain. He knew which desk it had to cross. He flew to Accra. Deputy Minister Charles Ofori Atta lived in a large house in Airport Residential, the kind of house that said, "I have arrived," without saying anything out loud. Tall walls, bougainvillea growing over the gate, a fountain in the garden that ran all night. Emeka had met him once, at a project launched 2 years ago. Ofori Atta had shaken his hand and said his firm was doing important work for the nation. His left eye would have twitched at that, if Emeka had been the kind of man to say something back. He went into the house. Ofori Atta was awake, and it was past midnight, but the man was at his kitchen table in a bathrobe with a glass of water and a phone, reading something. He was a heavy man, mid-50s, with the careful stillness of someone who had learned to show nothing on his face. The house was very quiet. Emeka stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the man, who had signed the death of 31 families and then shaken his hand and called it important work. He walked to the kitchen table. He pressed both hands flat on the surface, one on each side of Ofori Atta's phone. The wood darkened under his palms. Coordinates burned in. Then something new happened, something that had not happened before. Images appeared in the darkened wood. Not photographs, burned impressions like negatives. The families from the photographs. The red X marks, a signature. Ofori Atta's own signature. The one Emeka had seen at the bottom of project approval forms for 2 years. All of it, burned into the kitchen table in 30 seconds. Ofori Atta felt the temperature drop. He looked up from his phone. He saw the table. He did not scream. He was not that kind of man. but the glass of water slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor, and he stood up so fast his chair fell behind him, and he pressed himself against the far wall of his kitchen, staring at his own table, with his own signature burned into it, surrounded by the faces of people he had ordered removed. He stood there for a long time. Then he did something Emeka did not expect. He picked up his phone and dialed. "Raymond," he said. His voice was completely steady. "Change of plan. Don't burn the forest. Burn the warehouse instead. I make it look like the boy panicked and started it himself." Emeka was already moving before the sentence finished. He crossed the distance between Accra and the warehouse in a way that had no physical logic, less like flying and more like the space between the 2 points simply becoming shorter. He did not question it. He had stopped questioning what his body could do 2 days ago. He went in through the roof again. Daniel was still tied to the pipe. But something had changed. The guard from outside was now inside, standing near the door with his back to Daniel, on his own phone. He was nodding at whatever he was hearing. Emeka had perhaps 4 minutes. He could not untie the rope. He could not grip it. He could not speak. He could not carry his son out. He pressed his hand to the pipe Daniel was tied to. The metal darkened, corroded in a fast, spreading stain, not slowly, the way rust normally moves, but in seconds, eating through the old iron at the joint where the pipe met the wall bracket. Daniel felt the pipe shift. He looked down at it. He understood immediately, pulled hard, and the bracket tore free from the wall. He still had rope around his wrist, but his hands were in front of him now, the pipe section hanging from the rope between them. The guard turned at the sound. Daniel swung the pipe section. The guard went down. Daniel ran. He ran into the open night with his hands still tied and a length of pipe swinging between his wrists and no phone and no shoes. He ran north because that was the direction his feet chose and because he had his father's instincts, which had always pointed toward high ground when everything else failed. He ran until he reached a road. He stopped a truck. The driver took one look at the boy's wrists and the dried tears and the way he was breathing and did not ask questions. He drove. Daniel told him to go toward Kumasi city centre, toward the main police station, repeating the GPS coordinates he had memorized from the warehouse floor until the driver put them into his phone. Emeka did not follow his son. He turned back toward the forest. Because Raymond's instructions had changed, not burn the forest, burn the warehouse, which meant the burial site was still intact, which meant there was still time to do the one thing he had not yet managed. He needed one person with living eyes to see the burial site before Raymond found another way to destroy it. He thought about who, and the answer came with his left eye twitching hard. Because the person he needed was the one person he had been avoiding this entire time. Ruth, Kofi's wife. She was innocent. He was almost certain of it. And she was the only person close enough to this situation who would be believed when she spoke. A grieving wife who had come forward, who had no reason to lie. He went to Bantama. Ruth was asleep. Emeka stood in the bedroom doorway. Kofi was asleep beside her. Emeka looked at his old partner for a long moment. There was no rage left in him for Kofi. There was just the sad, flat knowledge of what the man had chosen and what it had cost. He went to Ruth's side of the bed. He pressed one finger to the wooden headboard above her head. She woke up, and not with a shout. She came awake the way people do when something pulls them up from deep sleep, slow and confused and reaching for the familiar. She looked at the headboard. The coordinates were there, and beside them, burned in careful letters, Section 7B. Go before dawn. Bring your phone. Ruth read it 3 times. She looked at her sleeping husband. She got out of bed without waking him and got dressed in the dark. She arrived at the site as the sky was beginning to pale at the edges. She did not know why she came. She told the police afterward that she could not explain it, that something in the quality of the warning had made her feel that not going was not a real option. She walked into Section 7B with her phone flashlight and found the disturbed soil. She found the tarpaulin corner that had worked its way up through the earth. Blue plastic, stained dark. She found, just below the surface, the first evidence of what lay beneath. A child's shoe. She called the police at 5:47 in the morning and stood over that ground and did not move until they arrived. Emeka watched from the dead tree above. As the first police vehicle arrived, as Ruth stood pointing at the ground with her whole body shaking, he felt something change in himself. Not a dramatic change, just a quiet settling. The way a structure feels when the last bolt is tightened. Something locking into place. His shadow, for the first time in 3 days, fell at the correct angle. His left eye was still. He looked at his hands. The wrongness was fading. The wide, dark pupils were contracting back toward normal. The slow following shadow was catching up. He had perhaps minutes left in this state. He could feel it the way you feel the last of your strength leaving. Not with pain, but with a clean, final clarity. He looked toward the road, where he could see, far off, a truck stopped and a boy talking to 2 police officers and pointing south. Daniel was safe. He looked toward Accra, where a deputy minister was sitting in his kitchen staring at a burned table and waiting for a phone call that was not coming, not knowing that the first police report had already been filed. He looked at the site below, where Ruth was speaking and pointing, and the officers were crouching, and the evidence of what had been hidden under this ground for 2 years was beginning, finally, to surface. He had done what he came back to do. His left eye did not twitch, because for the first time in 3 days, he was not fighting the truth. He was it. He came down from the tree slowly and walked to the edge of the site and stood in the early light. One young police officer looked up from his work and directly at Emeka. The officer froze. He could see him, fully, completely, not a shadow, not a cold feeling, but a man standing at the edge of the crime scene, in torn clothes, with dark eyes and soil still in the lines of his hands. The officer stood up slowly. "Sir," he said. "Sir, are you—" Emeka opened his mouth. For the first time in 3 days, sound came out. One sentence. Rough and damaged, like a voice dug out of the ground, but clear enough. "My name is Emeka Ose," he said. "I am the surveyor of record for Section 7B, and I need you to write down everything I am about to tell you." He held up his hands. Soil fell from them onto the ground between his feet. His left eye was perfectly still. Above him, in the pale morning sky, a single vulture turned once in a slow circle, and then was gone.